Hi, this is Sean. Welcome to Guitar Reference Guide. Today's a very impromptu, informal lesson about a checklist that I use with a lot of my students that I find to be really helpful when it comes to for them to understand where they are with their playing and the different things that they need to work on. So in this lesson, what I'm going to do is I made just a really quick loop with my looper, a 12-bar blues in A. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cycle through all the different things that I think are important for you to understand when you're playing through a 12-bar blues in A. I'm just going to jump right in with an A minor pentatonic scale, and then as it's going, I'm just going to talk about what I'm doing, and I'm going to talk about the different steps you can take, and in my opinion, the best way to go about it from one topic to the next. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Standard minor pentatonic. There's my target, my A. Now I'm going to go to my D note in the scale. Now I'm going to find my A note. Now I'm going to find my E note. My D note. Back to E. So there, playing a standard minor pentatonic scale, and as the chords changed, I tried to make sure that I touched on the root note of that chord that was in play on that given bar. So that was step one. So I'm playing the standard position of the 5th fret. Obviously, the next step would be to go next position, go up the neck, make sure you know how to play all the different positions, and how to do that in all the different positions. And that would be step number one. Once you feel like you have a handle on the pentatonic scales and you know where all your A's are, you know where all your D's are and where all your E's are, the next step would be to add the flat 5. And that's going to be something that you hear a lot. Now the flat 5 would be your E flat note. So all I'm doing is I'm adding this note to my minor pentatonic scale. Now you don't want to dwell on this note. You want to get in and out. More use as a passing tone. It also creates a really nice chromatic line when you go from the 4, sharp 4, flat 5 to the 5. And that's going to sound like this. So that was implementing the flat 5. That's also known as the blues scale. The next step we're going to do is going to be something that you hear also a lot of people use this tool, and that would be going from your minor third, which would be in an A minor pentatonic scale, or if we're looking at A, your C note would be my minor third, because from A that would be my minor third. My major third would be C sharp. Now, adding this note over the 1 chord, we're going to just start with the 1 chord, is going to help us imply that chord. So when you're hearing this blues riff here, that's implying an A7 chord. Now, the A7 chord has a third in it. When you're playing the minor pentatonic scale, that does not have a major third in it. It just has a minor third in it. So when we get to the 4 and the 5 chord, you're just going to go back to default, your regular minor pentatonic, and that'll sound something like this. Minor third, major third. Now I'm back to the 4 chord. Minor third to major third. There it is. You can bend into it too. 5 chord. Back to the 4 chord. third, and then I'm back. So you can also bend into it. Bending into it also works really well. Okay, so now that we're able to find our minor third to our major third, our C to our C sharp to our A, obviously the next step would be to do that over the 4 chord and the 5 chord. And then now all of a sudden you're going to start implying the chords a lot more. And so even if you were not to have playing over a loop or something and you start creating licks, you're going to start hearing the chords a lot more in your lines. And that's one of the main goals, I think, of this whole exercise, going through all these different things, is to try and imply the chords as you're playing and to be accountable as they're moving. So then the next step, like I said, would be over the 4 chord, which would be going from the F to the F sharp to the D, and then over the E7, which will be going from the A to the A sharp, G to G sharp to E. And that would sound something like this. Here's my 1. Now in my 4 chord, back to my 1. Back to my 4. Back to the 1. There's the 5 to the 4, back to the 1. 5. So as you can hear, that works really well. There was one other thing that I forgot to discuss when we started talking about the pentatonic scales. When you hit the 5 chord, one thing that works really well is going to the 9, which would be the B note over an A. So when it gets to the 5 chord, or the 5 riff, hitting this B note works extremely well, because that is the 5 of the 5 chord, and it's the 9 of the 1 chord. So let's hear what that sounds like. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through everything we just did. I'm going to incorporate minor third to major third. I'm going to incorporate the 9, the blues scale, and the pentatonics. Here we go. Just going to do one pass. Go. 5. How many times have you heard that? Okay, so now what we're going to talk about is, now that we've gone through the minor third to the major third pentatonics, flat 5, the 9 over the 5, we're going to talk about the major pentatonic scales. Now, the major pentatonic scales is something that a lot of people are very confused about. But simply put, if you know your A minor pentatonic scale, your major pentatonic scale is the second note in that scale. So for A, my major pentatonic scale would be C. So it's just like playing a regular A minor pentatonic scale, but you're starting from the second note, which would be C. There's my major pentatonic scale, Migro, Temptations. So that's a good way to think of it in terms of sound. So now we're going to start incorporating the major pentatonic into our playing, and we're going to introduce that by just playing over the 1 chord. On the 1 chord only are we going to go to the major pentatonic scale. When the 4 and the 5 hit, we're going back to the minor pentatonic scale, and that way we're easing into it. All right, so I'm going to start with the major pentatonic scale, A major pentatonic. And then when it goes 4 and 5, I'm going to go back to minor pentatonic. Here we go. Now minor pentatonic over the 4. Back to major pentatonic. Back to minor pentatonic. Back to major pentatonic. Back to minor pentatonic. So as you can see, the major pentatonic scale works fantastic. Hear B.B. King do that. A lot of players use the major pentatonic scale. So over the one chord only, you go to the A major, and then when it goes to the 4 and the 5, you go back to the minor. What's the next step going to be? Obviously, to play the major pentatonic scale over all 3 of the chords. And this is going to take on a more country kind of sound. A little less bluesy, a little bit more country. So now, learning your major pentatonic scales for your D and for your E is also going to imply these chords quite a bit more than just playing the standard minor pentatonic. So now I'm playing A major pentatonic, D major pentatonic, and E major pentatonic. Here we go. All major pentatonic scales. Here's my D major, back to my A major. Back to my D major. Back to my A major. E major. D major. Then I'm back to my A major. D major, back to A major, back to E major. So as you can hear, those pentatonic scales really outline the chords well. That's also great for rhythm guitar. You hear a lot of different players use that as a tool to create really cool licks over major chords using the major pentatonic scale. So now that we've gone through the major pentatonic scales, one thing that adds a lot to the major pentatonic scale is adding the minor third. Now, that's just like adding the flat 5 if you were playing minor pentatonic scale. And this gives us an even more country sound, and that kind of sounds like this. There it is. There's my minor third. That's a C major pentatonic scale with a minor third in it. But I'm going to go to A major. Look at this one right here. And then when I go to D major, then when I go to E major, minor third, and so then that's going to sound like this. I'm going to use these 3 main shapes. And then the E, I'm going to move up a whole step. Here we go. To the D, back to the A, back to the D, back to the A, to the E, D, and back to the A. So that works really well. Definitely a lot more country sounding, but it also works extremely well. Another flavor to add to your playing, even when you're playing over standard blues. Okay, so the next 2 things we're going to talk about are going to be, number 1, the chord tones, arpeggios, number 2, Mixolyian scales. Now, both of these concepts are a little more difficult to imply because you have to, when you're hitting each chord, you have to change the arpeggios. The intervals are a little bit bigger. However, the arpeggios / chord tones are the notes that make these chords. So when you play any of these notes, they're going to work great. So this is a really, really important step in being able to imply the chords. Because if you're playing the notes that are in the chords, everything is just going to sound good. It's going to imply them even more. So we're going to go through all 3 of them real quick, then I'm going to give you a demo. So for an A7, my 1 is A, my 3 is C sharp, my 5 is E, and my flat 7 is G. Those are the notes that make a 7 chord. So when it's on the A7 chord, those are the notes. 1, 3, 5, flat 7. On the D, you're going to have D, you're going to have F sharp is my 3, A is my 5, and C is my flat 7. And then for the E, 1 is obviously E, B, my flat 7 is my D, and then I'm back to where I started. So here are the arpeggios for A7, D7, and E7 over 12-bar blues in A. D7, back to the A, D, back to the A, to the E, to the D, back to the A, to the E. So they work extremely well in implying the chords, as you can hear. And then the last thing is going to be similar in that each one of these scales reconciles with each one of these chords. We're going to be looking at our A Mixolyian scale, just like an A major scale with a flat 7. We're going to look at our D Mixolyian scale and our E Mixolyian scale. So each one of these scales is the scale that implies each one of these chords. Now, the A Mixolyian scale is in the key of D. You go to the 4th, it's D major scale starting and ending on A. For the D, 4th is G. G major scale starting and ending on D, that's your D Mixolyian scale. And your E would be in the key of A. So there's my 4th, there's my A. And here's a demo of the Mixolyian scales. A little jazzier sound. Now it's got my E, to my D, back to my A, to the E. So we've covered a lot in this lesson. We've gone through all the checkpoints, or all the things that I think are really important in understanding when you take on a 12-bar blues in any key. And if you learn all these different concepts, when you start learning all those licks from the artists you like, you'll be able to understand what they're doing. Instead of just learning the licks rogue, you'll actually understand what's going on, and hopefully that'll allow you to implement those ideas over different songs, different chords, etc. In other words, being able to recycle those ideas. Thanks so much for visiting me at guitarreferenceguide.com, and I hope everyone has a great day.